Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name's Lefebvre and it's a brand new year. And usually on YouTube, I tend to gravitate towards doing a series throughout the year. I've done a birth month flower series. I did a bullet journal series that I don't even think lasted the whole year. Wasn't my thing. I did a floral bouquet series, and I wanted to do another series this year because I feel like it's content that can be transferred throughout the whole year. We can develop our skills and have fun. And I really enjoyed the birth month flowers. I did those back in 2020, but I was looking recently at birth month flowers and realized that there are almost 2 birth flowers for every month. And I did one set back in 2020, and I thought this year I'd start off by doing the other set of flowers. So for January, they are carnations, but they are also snowdrops. So today we're going to be painting some beautiful, simple snowdrops that at the end of the year, you can turn this into a calendar or cards for birthdays, depending on the birth month, and just have fun with it. So let's jump into today's video and get started. Okay friends, so today I'm going to show you how to paint a simple snowdrop flower for our January birth month flower. Like I said, I did the other versions of birth month flowers a few years ago. I'll link the videos to January below, so you can do those videos as well if you would rather the other flower. But today we're going to be painting a snowdrop. I actually did a tutorial, a little bit more of an in-depth tutorial on this with a background on my Patreon, which I'll just quickly show you. I did this fun snowdrop painting. So if you want something a little bit more detailed with a background, you could always become a member of my Patreon, which is only $3 Canadian a month. And you get 3 bonus tutorials, all of my YouTube content ad-free, and also tracing pages. If you are not as into free hand drawing yourself, you can always use the tracing pages as well. But today I'm going to simplify it so we can paint it together without a background. And it's a white flower, so I'm going to also be giving you tips on how to paint white flowers on a white paper. So for this, you are going to need a smaller brush. I have a size 2 round here, which I think is all we're going to need. I have my Shinhan paints, and I have my water, paper towel, and then for the paper, I am using Academy watercolor paper from a block that I just cut in half. This is like one of my favorite affordable cotton papers, and I just take it off the block by removing it with a palette knife because it's all glued down on either side. Just gently remove it, and then I split it in half just so I'm not painting on a whole piece of paper. Okay, and we're ready to go. So we are going to be painting a snowdrop. So I'm not going to freehand draw it. We're not going to be doing like a sketch first. We're just going to be going right into painting it. So I'm going to start with the stem, I think, and I'm just going to grab some olive green on my brush, not too dark. And I'm just going to start with this almost like a candy cane shape, like that for a stem. And you want it really nice and thin for the stem. So really light pressure, like so. And then you're gonna paint kind of like this gumdrop shape at the end of this little hook, just like that. Okay. Then it also has like a little piece of the stem that kind of sticks up right here. Kind of comes to a point. So it's a little bit thicker, and then it comes to a point like that. Now, if you want to darken your green a little bit more, just to get a different variation of it, while it's still wet, I'm just going to tap in a little bit of a darker green. I just mixed it a little bit with my, what blue is that? I can't remember what blue it is. It's kind of like a Winsor blue or a phthalo blue. And I'm just going to go around the stem really gently just to get a darker color. Just going up just to give it a bit of a shadow, and then a little bit right there. Okay. And then we're going to want to let that one dry. Now we're going to do another one kind of coming down, but I want the petals kind of in front of the stem. So I'm actually going to start with the little gumdrop shape here. So I'm just going to do this, and then we'll connect the stem afterwards. Okay, so we're going to do this. It's kind of like a triangle with rounded edges. Okay, and then I'm going to grab a little bit more of my blue and just add it to my green. And I'm just tapping it on one side so you get a little bit of a darker shadow. Okay. Then, yeah, I'm going to do the stem back here, but I want some petals in front, so I'm going to wait to do that. Then we're going to let that completely dry before we move on to the white petals. Okay, now that it's dry, we're going to mix up our white color, which essentially is going to be a really light wash of black or gray. So I don't actually have black in my palette. I like to make black. And by that, I take some burnt sienna and then indigo. And about half and half of that is black. If you want it a little bit more on the blue side, you can add a little bit more indigo. Actually a little bit more like a blacky blue. You add a little bit more indigo. If you want a little bit more of like a warmth to it or brown, you would add a little bit more burnt sienna. But this is a really good alternative to using a black paint. Okay, so now we're just gonna water this down so it's really, really light. You want a very light wash. Now, one mistake that a lot of beginners will make, they mix up their watery mix here and they'll go straight into their painting. There's a ton of water on my brush right now, so I'm actually going to tap it on my paper towel first to take off some of that excess water, okay? All right, now that our paper's dry, we are going to do the petals. And the petals are almost kind of like leaf shapes. So make sure it's really, really light, like really light of a wash of a gray. And you're gonna do these kind of like leaf shapes coming from. It's a little bit more narrow at the top here. And then it gets a bit bigger and then it comes to a point. Okay, and I just separated those because there's gonna be another one behind, but there's also these like internal petals in there. Okay, so I'm just gonna let that dry because I want them to be separate. So again, really light wash. I'm going to do another one here, so a little bit thinner towards the base, then it comes out to a point, out, back. Okay. You want your wash of your gray to be so light that you're questioning if you're going to see it or not. This is even a little bit too dark. Okay, right now it looks a little bit more gray, but it will give the illusion that it's white once we add shading. So I just keep adding a little bit more water to my brush rather than color. Okay, and then I'm going to do another one over here. Like so. Okay, and then we're going to let that dry before we do the petals that are in between. Okay, so while that's drying, I'm going to take my olive green again, and I'm going to do my stem. And it's going to kind of come up and back and straight down. And the reason why I did the stem after, unlike the one I did at the beginning, because I didn't know if these petals were going to overlap the stem, and I wanted them to kind of be in front, which they're not really, but that's okay. It just kind of gives room just in case we wanted to do that. Okay, and then that little, kind of reminds me of like an alfalfa sprout, or you know alfalfa's hair from the Little Rascals, that little hair that sticks up. Then we're gonna add a little bit more blue to our green here just to make it a little bit darker. Add a little bit more shadow. And because the bulb part here is dry on our flower, we can take a little bit more green, a little bit more blue. You could always use a dark green too if that's the color you wanted. And I'm just going to add a little bit more shadow to the one side. Just to make it a little bit deeper, and I can blend it out by washing off my brush, drying it on my paper towel, just gently kind of blending that out so it's not so harsh. Tap a little bit more color. Like that. Just for a little bit more shading. And if you wanted to add a little bit more shading on the stem, you definitely could too. Okay, this is a detailed painting, but not necessarily a realistic painting. Okay, now while we're still waiting for these to dry, are they dry? Ah, they're dry actually. See, the less water and paint you use, the faster it will dry. We're going to add the little center in it. So the other petal, there's 3 petals on the snowdrop, is behind. It's going to be on the other side, but inside the snowdrop are these little petals that kind of come down, and then you're just going to do like this W shape almost. Make sure it's really light. You're just going to fill it in there like so, and I'm leaving like a little bit of white space just so it shows a bit of separation. It kind of comes up. It's like this little W, which I'm not doing a great job at doing. That's okay. Okay, and we're gonna let that dry. It's supposed to be like a whoop whoop. All good. Okay, like that. We're gonna let that dry. Now our petals are looking a little flat. Once we add that extra shading and stuff, it will really pop out. Okay, while we're waiting for that to dry, let's do some leaves. So I'm going to grab some more olive green, and I'm going to just start doing, they're like shorter but long. Does that make sense? That doesn't make sense. Long, thin leaves like this, but they're not like too long. Okay, I'll have one that kind of comes up behind this stem. Like so. And while it's still wet, I'm going to grab a little bit of my darker green, and I'm just going to tap kind of behind the stem so it looks like there's a bit of shading behind on this leaf, so you can see that stem in front. Add a little bit of shading to the bottom here, like that. Then I'm going to do another leaf coming up this way, right in front of that stem, I think. Grab my dark green again. I like to add my dark green to the base of my leaves, like that. And then I'm going to do another leaf, and it's going to come up behind the other ones. Now I'm trying not to touch it too much because I don't want them to bleed into each other. This one I'm going to have it curve just a little bit. And because this one's behind, again, we're going to add our darker green and have a shadow. So the stem pops out in front. Like that. See how that works? And now before this dries, I'm just going to add a little bit more darkness to the bottom. And it's still kind of wet. I'm going to wash off my brush, just tap it on my paper towel, and I'm just going to skim the bottom like this, just so it bleeds out a bit. So it looks like it's sitting on the ground. Just a tad, like that. Okay. So there are the leaves, and then this is also dry. So now we can do the inside part in that last petal. So I'm going to start with the petal that goes behind. Okay, I'm just going to do a little edge of the petal here. And this is actually going to be darker than that inside petal. So we'll add a little bit of shading in a second. You can go just a little bit. We're gonna let that part dry, and while that's drying, I'm gonna grab a little bit of green, because there's a little bit of green on this inside petal, not pillow. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a little bit of olive green, and it's kind of like, it's almost like this heart shape. Oops, it's kind of bleeding into that petal behind. That's okay. Like that. Okay. Started bleeding there a little bit. That's okay. And then before we continue, I'm just going to let it dry so we can finish off with some shading that's really going to make those petals pop. Okay, now it's dry. We're going to add just a little bit more of our darker gray for a bit of shadow. So the inside here is going to be a bit darker. So I'm just going to add a little bit more darker gray to the center here. Just the top center. Then I'm going to wash off my brush, dry it a little bit on my paper towel, and just kind of blend out that edge just so it's not so harsh. Like that. Okay. Then I'm going to add a little bit more, some line work. So from the top here, I'm just going to do, oops, little kind of lines all going back to the base here. Just so you can see there's a little bit of movement and curve to these petals. Very, very lightly. And it's going to be darkest at the base where it hits that green part. A little bit at the tip there. Then this one, I'm going to have some more shadow kind of coming down from the back one. Like that. Little lines. Like that. Maybe a little bit more darkness right in here, right at the base, just a tad bit more. So a tiny bit darker. Like that. Like so. And I might grab a little bit more green. Just kind of add a little bit more darkness to those little green bits there. And then finally, I'm just going to add a little bit more darker green. Just some lines on the leaves, kind of going upwards for a little bit of texture. And that's it. And there are your January snowdrops. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you're excited about this series. It's going to be fun to do this year. Let me know in the comments below which month is your birth month and which flower you're most excited to paint, and I will see you in our next video. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye!